There comes a moment quiet, unannounced, when something within you grows tired of the constant noise. Not the noise of the world, but the noise inside your own mind. The endless commentary, the rehearsing of conversations that already happened, the imagining of futures that may never arrive, the judging, comparing, worrying, explaining, defending. And in that moment, you don't dramatically declare anything. You don't shout. You simply feel a gentle exhaustion with living exclusively inside thought. And that exhaustion is sacred. It is the soul's way of whispering, there is another way to be here. Most people believe their thoughts are who they are. They wake up inside a stream of ideas, memories, plans, and labels, and they assume this stream is the self. But the truth, ancient, quiet, and liberating, is that you are not the voice in your head. You are the awareness listening to it. Thoughts come and go. Awareness remains. And peace does not arrive when your thoughts finally behave. Peace arrives when you stop confusing yourself with them. The mind is a beautiful tool. It helps you navigate the world, solve problems, remember names, build bridges, write books, and plan journeys. But when the tool becomes the master, suffering begins. The mind was designed to serve life, not replace it. Yet so many people live as if life is something to be analyzed rather than experienced. They stand in a sunset and think about it instead of feeling it. They sit with a loved one and evaluate the moment instead of entering it. They move through entire years without ever fully arriving in a single moment. Living in your head is exhausting because the head is never satisfied. The mind always wants more information, more certainty, more control. It replays the past as if it could be edited and previews the future as if it could be guaranteed. But life does not live in the past or the future. Life lives here, always here. And when you finally step out of the mental noise and into presence, something remarkable happens. Nothing needs to change for you to feel peaceful. Peace is not an achievement. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is not something you earn after fixing yourself. Peace is what remains when you stop arguing with reality. It is what you discover when you no longer insist that this moment should be different from what it is. The ego resists this truth because the ego survives on dissatisfaction. The ego says, I will be at peace when I have more, when I am admired, when I am understood, when I am healed, when I am certain. But the soul says, be at peace now and let life respond. When you live in your head, you see life through filters. You label experiences as good or bad, success or failure, progress or setback. But when you step into awareness, you see that life is simply unfolding. Clouds move across the sky without resistance. Seasons change without regret. The ocean does not apologize for its waves. And you, too, are part of this intelligent flow. You were never meant to control it, only to cooperate with it. There is a deep relief in realizing you do not have to manage everything. You do not have to carry the weight of the world in your thoughts. You do not have to rehearse every possible outcome to be safe. The universe is not asking you to be its supervisor. It is inviting you to be its witness. And witnessing is far lighter than controlling. The ego thrives on identity. It asks, who am I in comparison to others? Am I enough? Am I winning? Am I behind? But awareness does not compare. Awareness simply is. When you stop living in your head, you stop living as a bundle of labels. You are no longer the story of your past or the projection of your future. You are the presence experiencing this breath, this heartbeat, this moment. And here is the paradox that changes everything. When you stop trying to fix yourself, healing accelerates. When you stop obsessing over your flaws, compassion arises. When you stop narrating your life, you begin to live it. The mind wants to improve the self. The soul wants to remember that the self was never broken. So much of your suffering comes from resisting what is. You resist your emotions by labeling them as wrong. You resist your circumstances by wishing they were different. You resist your own humanity by demanding perfection. But resistance is a form of fear, and fear dissolves in awareness. When you allow an emotion to be felt without a story, it moves through you like weather. When you allow a moment to be what it is, it reveals its hidden intelligence. You may notice that when you stop overthinking, your body relaxes, your breath deepens, your shoulders soften. This is not accidental. The body lives in the present. It does not worry about yesterday or tomorrow. unless the mind instructs it to. When you return to presence, you return to the wisdom of the body. And the body knows how to heal when it is not constantly interrupted by fear-based thinking. Many people ask, how do I stop living in my head? And the answer is simpler than the mind expects. You do not fight thoughts. You do not silence them by force. You notice them. You watch them. You let them pass like clouds across the sky of awareness. The moment you observe a thought instead of believing it, you are free. Not free from thinking, but free from identification. The mind will tell you that presence is passive, that letting go is weakness, that awareness is avoidance. But look closely. The most powerful actions arise from stillness. The clearest decisions come from calm. The deepest love flows from presence. When you are anchored in awareness, you respond instead of react. And response is always wiser than reaction. Living in your head often means living in fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough. But awareness reveals a deeper truth. You are already whole. You do not need to add anything to yourself to be worthy of peace. You are not a problem to be solved. You are an expression of life itself. The universe did not make a mistake when it made you. It did not forget to give you something essential. Every oak tree begins as an acorn, and it does not apologize for not being tall yet. It does not compare itself to the forest. It simply grows according to its nature. And so do you when you stop interfering with your own becoming. When you finally stop living in your head, you begin to trust life. Not blindly, but deeply. You trust that you do not need to know everything to move forward. You trust that clarity comes through presence, not anxiety. You trust that answers arise when the mind relaxes its grip. This trust is not naive, it is intelligent. It is alignment with the same force that spins galaxies and beats your heart without asking permission. You may notice that forgiveness becomes easier when you are present. Resentment requires memory and imagination. It feeds on stories of what should have been. But in this moment, right now, there is nothing to forgive. There is only breath, sensation, awareness. And from this space, compassion flows naturally, not as a moral duty, but as a recognition of shared humanity. Peace does not mean life becomes perfect. It means you stop demanding perfection from life. It means you meet each experience with openness rather than resistance. It means you allow joy without fear and pain without drama. It means you trust that even uncertainty has a place in the greater order. The ego wants guarantees. The soul wants truth. And the truth is that life is happening now, not in your thoughts about it. When you return to this moment, again and again, you discover that peace was never missing. It was only obscured by noise. So let the mind do what it does best, think when needed, but do not live there, live here, in the space between thoughts, in the breath before the next sentence, in the awareness that notices the world without needing to explain it. This is where peace resides, not as an idea, but as an experience. And as you practice this gentle return to presence, you may find that life softens, problems lose their sharp edges, relationships deepen, ordinary moments glow with quiet meaning. You are no longer rushing toward fulfillment, you are inhabiting it. When you finally stop living in your head, life does not become smaller, it becomes vast, intimate, alive. And you realize, with a calm certainty that needs no defense, that peace was never something you had to create. It was always what you are, waiting patiently for you to come home. And as you rest more frequently in this home of awareness, you may begin to notice a subtle but profound shift in how life speaks to you. Guidance no longer arrives as loud instructions or anxious calculations. It appears quietly, intuitively, often when the mind is least involved. A feeling in the body, a gentle nudge, a sense of ease or unease that has no logical explanation, yet proves accurate time and again. This is the intelligence of life moving through you when you are no longer blocking it with constant mental interference. The mind insists on certainty before action. Awareness invites action before certainty. And strangely, when you trust this inner alignment, life seems to meet you halfway. Doors open without force. Conversations unfold with less effort. Decisions feel lighter, not because they are insignificant, but because they are no longer burdened by fear. You are not reckless, you are receptive. You are not passive, you are aligned. There is a kind of humility that comes with stepping out of the head and into presence. You begin to see how much energy was spent trying to be right. trying to be seen, trying to protect an image. And you realize how unnecessary it all was. Life does not require you to perform for it. It asks only that you participate sincerely. When you stop defending a constructed identity, you free an enormous amount of life force that was previously trapped in self-maintenance. You may notice that silence becomes more comfortable. Not the awkward silence that demands filling, but a living silence that feels rich and intelligent. In this silence, creativity is born. Love deepens. Truth reveals itself without argument. The need to constantly explain who you are and why you do what you do slowly dissolves. You become less interested in convincing and more interested in being. From this place, compassion naturally expands, not as a virtue you practice, but as a state you inhabit. When you are no longer dominated by your own mental stories, you can truly listen to another without rehearsing your response. You can see beyond behavior into pain, beyond opinions into fear, beyond words into longing. And this seeing changes everything. Judgment fades, not because you suppress it, but because it no longer makes sense. Living in presence does not remove challenges from your life. It removes the unnecessary suffering layered on top of them. You still feel sadness, but it does not become despair. You still experience loss, but it does not define you. Emotions move through you like guests rather than taking up permanent residence. You feel them fully, honor them honestly, and allow them to leave when their message has been delivered. There is a deep freedom in no longer needing every experience to validate you. Praise no longer inflates. Criticism no longer devastates. Success is enjoyed without attachment, and setbacks are met without self-condemnation. You begin to sense that your worth is not negotiable, it is inherent. And from this knowing, you interact with the world, not to prove your value, but to express it. When you stop living in your head, time itself seems to soften. You are no longer rushing toward the next moment as if salvation lives there. You are not trying to escape the present in search of a better one. Instead, you discover that each moment carries its own completeness, even the unfinished moments, even the uncertain ones, especially the ordinary ones. And perhaps the greatest gift of this shift is trust, quiet, grounded trust. Trust that you will know what to do when it is time to do it. Trust that you do not need to hold your life together with constant thinking. Trust that something far wiser than the mind is already orchestrating your becoming. This trust does not make you complacent, it makes you courageous, because you are no longer acting from fear of getting life wrong, but from faith in being guided. So you return again and again to this simple practice of noticing the breath, noticing the space between thoughts, noticing the aliveness in your hands, your chest, your eyes. Each return is an act of love. Each return is a quiet declaration that you are willing to live rather than merely think about living. And in this willingness, peace continues to deepen, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a steady presence. A calm that does not depend on circumstances. A sense of belonging that does not require approval. A knowing that you are not separate from life, but an intimate expression of it. And from here, everything you do becomes less about effort and more about flow, less about control and more about trust, less about the noise of the mind and more about the quiet truth of who you have always been. And as this quiet truth settles more deeply within you, you may begin to recognize how gently life responds when it is met without resistance. Situations that once felt heavy lose their grip. People who once triggered old patterns no longer hold the same power, not because they have changed, but because you have stopped meeting them from the reflexes of the mind. You are no longer negotiating with life from a place of defense. You are meeting it openly, without armor, without rehearsed conclusions. This openness reveals something extraordinary. Life does not need to be controlled to be meaningful. Meaning arises naturally when you are present for it. A walk becomes a meditation. A simple conversation becomes an exchange of energy rather than words. Even solitude transforms from loneliness into communion. You begin to feel accompanied by life itself, as though something unseen is always walking beside you, not to direct you, but to support you. The mind often fears this surrender because it equates letting go with disappearing. But awareness shows you the opposite. When you stop clinging to thoughts, you do not vanish, you expand. You are no longer confined to a narrow identity shaped by memory and expectation. You become spacious enough to hold contradiction, uncertainty, and wonder without needing to resolve them. And in that spaciousness, a deeper intelligence moves. This intelligence does not rush, it does not panic, it does not argue. It unfolds with patience and precision. It knows when to act and when to wait. When you align with it, effort becomes less strained. You still take action, but action feels like cooperation rather than force. You push less, trust more, and discover that life often delivers exactly what is needed when you stop insisting on what you think you want. There is a tenderness that emerges when you are no longer ruled by thought. You become gentler with yourself. You notice the subtle ways you once criticized your own humanity, the moments of fatigue, doubt, or vulnerability, and you begin to meet them with kindness instead. You realize that harshness never brought clarity, and pressure never produced peace. Acceptance, on the other hand, opens doors the mind could never unlock. From this place, gratitude becomes effortless. Not gratitude as a practiced habit, but gratitude as a natural response to being alive. You feel it in the way light enters a room, in the rhythm of your breath, in the simple fact of being conscious at all. You no longer wait for extraordinary events to justify appreciation. Ordinary existence becomes enough, and something else quietly shifts: your relationship with fear. Fear no longer defines your choices. It still appears because it is part of the human experience, but it is no longer in charge. You see it as a signal, not a command. You acknowledge it without obeying it, and in doing so, courage arises naturally. Not the loud courage of confrontation, but the steady courage of authenticity. Living this way, you begin to sense that life is not happening to you, but through you. You are not a separate observer watching the world unfold. You are an active expression of the same creative force that animates everything. This realization dissolves the illusion of isolation. You are never truly alone because you have never been separate. The need to rush fades. The need to prove fades. The need to arrive fades. What remains is a quiet confidence in the unfolding itself. You are no longer trying to get somewhere else to finally be at peace. You understand, at last, that peace is not a destination, it is a way of traveling. And so you continue, moment by moment, returning to presence, whenever you notice the mind pulling you back into old habits, not with frustration, but with patience, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Each return strengthens the connection. Each return deepens the knowing. And gradually, almost without effort, peace stops being something you visit occasionally and becomes the atmosphere in which you live. This is what happens when you finally stop living in your head. Life does not become silent, but it becomes harmonious. It does not become predictable, but it becomes trustworthy. And you realize with a calm certainty that needs no explanation that you were never meant to figure life out. You were meant to feel it, trust it, and allow it to move through you as the living expression of peace that you already are. And in this unfolding, something almost imperceptible, yet deeply reassuring, begins to take shape. A sense of belonging that no longer depends on circumstances. You no longer feel like a visitor in your own life. You feel rooted as if you have finally settled into yourself. The restless searching softens, not because all questions have been answered, but because the need to constantly question has relaxed its grip. You discover that not knowing can be peaceful when you trust what is holding you. The mind once demanded explanations for everything: why this happened, why that didn't, why you are the way you are. But presence reveals that meaning is not always something you think your way into. Often, it is something you live your way into. Understanding arrives after experience, not before it. And when you allow life to move first, clarity follows gently, like dawn rather than lightning. You begin to notice how much of your former tension came from resisting your own inner rhythms. You pushed when you were meant to rest. You forced answers when you were meant to wait. You criticize yourself for not being ready when readiness could not be rushed. Now, attuned to awareness, you listen more carefully. You honor the natural ebb and flow. You trust that pauses are not failures, and stillness is not stagnation. This trust reshapes your relationship with effort. You still care, you still show up, but you no longer exhaust yourself trying to control outcomes. You act with sincerity and then release the result. You understand that your responsibility is to align your intention, not to micromanage the universe. And in this release, effort becomes elegant, action becomes clean. You do what is yours to do, and you allow the rest to unfold. As the noise quiets, intuition grows stronger, not as something mystical or dramatic, but as a simple clarity about what feels true. You sense when to speak and when silence carries more wisdom. You know when to stay and when to leave. You recognize opportunities not because they shout, but because they feel right. This knowing does not argue, it does not persuade, it simply is. With this clarity comes a new relationship to identity. You are no longer overly invested in roles, success, failure, strong one, fixer, seeker. You can wear them when needed and set them down when they no longer serve. You realize that identity is functional, not fundamental. Who you are at the deepest level cannot be reduced to any description. And this realization brings enormous relief. From here, love changes texture. It becomes less about need and more about presence. You no longer seek others to complete you, because you are not experiencing yourself as incomplete. You share not from emptiness, but from fullness. And when connection happens, it feels less like attachment and more like resonance. You recognize yourself in others, and others recognize themselves in you without effort. Even pain, when it arises, is met differently. You no longer dramatize it or suppress it. You allow it space, knowing it has its own intelligence. Pain becomes a messenger rather than an enemy. It points, teaches, softens. And because you are not layering it with mental resistance, it passes more quickly, leaving behind insight rather than bitterness. There is a quiet joy in this way of being, not the excitement of constant stimulation, but the contentment of alignment. You may still laugh loudly, dream boldly, create passionately, but beneath it all runs a steady current of ease. You are no longer bracing yourself against life. You are moving with it. And perhaps the most profound shift of all is this. You stop postponing peace. You no longer tell yourself that one day, when things are different, you will finally relax. You understand that the habit of postponement was created by the mind, not required by life. Peace does not wait for conditions to improve. It emerges the moment you stop insisting that they must. So you live now, not perfectly, not constantly mindful, but sincerely. You notice when you drift back into the head and you return without self-reproach. You breathe, you feel, you remember, and each time you do, the space of peace opens a little wider. This is the quiet revolution that happens when awareness becomes your home. Nothing dramatic announces it, no external marker confirms it, yet everything changes. You are no longer trying to escape your life or explain it away. You are inhabiting it fully, gently, honestly, and in this inhabiting, you recognize a truth that feels both simple and immense. Life was never asking you to be more than you are. It was asking you to be here, and now finally, you are. There is a quiet moment that arrives each morning before the world asks anything of you, before the noise of obligations and identities rushes in to tell you who you are supposed to be. It is the moment when your eyes open and your breath returns to consciousness, when life itself gently says, you are still here. And if you listen carefully, beneath the hum of thought and memory, there is an invitation waiting for you not to rush, not to worry, not to plan, but to give thanks. Not because everything is perfect, not because your problems have vanished, but because existence itself has chosen you once again. Gratitude is not a polite habit or a spiritual accessory. It is a way of seeing that changes the quality of your entire life. When you thank God every morning, you are not thanking some distant force for favors granted or withheld. You are aligning yourself with the deepest truth of who you are, a being that did not create itself, yet is sustained moment by moment by an intelligence far greater than the thinking mind. Gratitude is the soul's recognition that life is not owed to us, that every heartbeat is a gift, that every breath is borrowed from the infinite and returned again. Most people wake up already behind, already anxious, already rehearsing yesterday's disappointments or tomorrow's fears. The ego thrives in this state. It lives on comparison, complaint, and the illusion that fulfillment is always somewhere else. But the moment you say thank you, not as a ritual, but as a felt experience, the ego loosens its grip. Gratitude pulls you out of time. It dissolves the false urgency that says you are lacking, that you are incomplete, that you must prove something before you can be at peace. You see, the ego cannot survive in a grateful heart. The ego needs dissatisfaction to justify itself. It needs resentment to feel important. It needs fear to feel necessary. Gratitude exposes the great misunderstanding at the center of egoic life, the belief that happiness is conditional. When you thank God for this moment, exactly as it is, you are declaring that your worth is not postponed, that your peace is not dependent on circumstances, that your joy is not a reward to be earned later. Every moment of your life is something to be grateful for, not because every moment feels good, but because every moment is meaningful. Even pain carries instruction. Even loss carries awakening. Even confusion carries a hidden invitation to surrender what no longer serves you. When you resist what is, you suffer twice. Once from the experience itself, and once from the belief that it should not be happening. Gratitude does not deny difficulty. It transforms your relationship to it. It says, I trust that there is a larger intelligence at work here, even when I cannot see it. The soul always knows what the mind cannot yet understand. It knows that life is not happening to you, but through you. It knows that every experience is shaping you toward remembrance of your true nature as a divine expression of love, creativity, and awareness. When you thank God in the middle of uncertainty, you are listening to the soul rather than obeying the fear-based stories of the ego. Think of gratitude as a doorway rather than a destination. The moment you walk through it, you enter a different dimension of being. Time slows, judgment softens, resistance relaxes. You stop demanding that life be different in order for you to feel whole. Instead, you discover that wholeness was never missing. It was simply covered by expectation, comparison, and the constant mental commentary that insists on measuring everything. When you live in gratitude, you begin to see that the present moment is not a stepping stone to somewhere else. It is the place where life is fully alive. The past exists only as memory, the future only as imagination, but this moment, this breath, this awareness, this quiet aliveness is where the divine meets you. To be grateful now is to say yes to life as it is unfolding, without waiting for guarantees. Forgiveness becomes natural in a grateful heart, not because you excuse harm, but because you understand that carrying resentment is a refusal to receive the fullness of life. There are no justified resentments for a soul that recognizes its eternal nature. Resentment ties you to the very pain you wish to escape. Gratitude loosens that tie. It reminds you that peace is not found by rewriting the past, but by releasing your grip on it. Healing always begins within. It does not start when others change, when circumstances improve, or when conditions finally meet your expectations. It begins the moment you stop arguing with reality and start honoring your own aliveness. Gratitude is a form of inner healing because it redirects your attention from what is missing to what is present, from what is wrong to what is alive, from what is feared to what is sacred. You are already enough, and gratitude is how you remember that truth. You do not become worthy by achieving more, owning more, or impressing more. Worthiness is inherent. It is the nature of existence itself. When you thank God for your life, not the life you wish you had, but the one you are living, you are affirming that your being is not a mistake, that your presence here matters, that your soul chose this experience for reasons rooted in growth and remembrance. Living this way does not mean you stop aspiring or creating. On the contrary, gratitude fuels inspired action. When you are grateful, your actions come from abundance rather than fear. You create not to fill a void, but to express the overflow of what you already are. You serve not to earn love, but because love is moving through you. Every morning is a chance to realign. Every moment is a chance to begin again. You can thank God while brushing your teeth, while waiting in traffic, while facing uncertainty, while sitting in silence. Gratitude does not require special circumstances. It requires only awareness, and awareness is always available to you. So let this be your practice, not as discipline, but as devotion. Thank God every morning, not because life is perfect, but because it is alive. Thank God every moment, not because you understand everything, but because you are held by something greater than understanding. In doing so, you will discover that gratitude is not merely something you do, it is something you become. And when gratitude becomes your way of being, life itself begins to reveal its quiet, extraordinary grace. And as you remain with this awareness, something subtle yet profound begins to occur. You start to notice that gratitude is not dependent on conditions improving. It is independent of circumstance altogether. It arises not from what happens to you, but from how deeply you recognize the miracle of being conscious within life itself. You begin to feel that life is not an obstacle course to be endured, but a field of experience designed to awaken you into love, humility, and trust. Even the moments that once felt empty or wasted begin to reveal themselves as sacred pauses, necessary spaces where the soul catches its breath. In this state, you no longer ask life to justify itself to you. You stop demanding explanations for every turn and every delay. Instead, you rest in a quiet confidence that whatever is unfolding with you, not against you. Gratitude gently dismantles the need to control outcomes. It reminds you that the same intelligence that causes your heart to beat without instruction is guiding the larger movements of your life with equal precision. When you trust that, you stop interfering with fear. You stop tightening around uncertainty. You allow life to breathe through you. This is where true freedom begins, not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to stop arguing with what is. Inner freedom is born the moment you realize that peace is not found by rearranging the external world, but by aligning internally with the truth of your being. Gratitude is the alignment. It is the soul saying, I consent to life as my teacher. And when you consent, resistance softens, and wisdom flows in naturally, without force. You may notice that when gratitude becomes your inner posture, relationships begin to change. You stop expecting others to complete you or behave in ways that validate your worth. You see them as fellow travelers, each carrying their own wounds, their own lessons, their own divine spark. Compassion replaces judgment, not because you have convinced yourself to be kind, but because you recognize yourself in everyone you meet. Gratitude expands your heart to include what the ego once rejected. In moments of silence, you may even feel a quiet joy that has no obvious cause. This joy does not depend on excitement or achievement. It is the joy of alignment, the deep satisfaction of being where you are, as you are, without apology. It is the joy of realizing that you do not need to escape the present moment to find meaning. Meaning is already here, woven into your breath, your awareness, your simple presence. As this realization deepens, you begin to live more gently. You speak with more intention. You listen more fully. You notice the sacredness in ordinary things, the way light falls across a room, the rhythm of your steps, the quiet intelligence behind nature's effortless order. Gratitude sharpens perception. It reveals that nothing is truly ordinary when seen through the eyes of awareness. And perhaps most importantly, gratitude dissolves fear at its root. Fear is always a projection into an imagined future or a fixation on a remembered past. Gratitude anchors you here, where fear has no authority. In this moment, you are breathing. In this moment, you are alive. In this moment, you are supported. When you remain here, fear loses its voice, and love becomes the guiding frequency of your life. You do not need to wait for a crisis to awaken this way. You do not need to reach the end of your life to realize its value. You can thank God now, in the middle of your imperfect, unfinished, beautifully human experience. You can allow gratitude to be the lens through which you see everything, success and failure, gain and loss, clarity and confusion alike. And as you do, you will come to understand something quietly revolutionary. Life is not asking you to become someone else. It is inviting you to remember who you already are. A conscious expression of divine intelligence, of being capable of awareness, love, and choice. Gratitude is the remembrance. It is the gentle return to truth, moment by moment, breath by breath, life by life. And as this remembrance settles more deeply within you, you may begin to sense that gratitude is not something you add to life, but something you uncover beneath the noise. It has always been there, waiting patiently, like a quiet current beneath the surface of thought. When the mind grows still enough, when the constant commentary softens, gratitude rises on its own, not as an effort, but as a natural response to being alive. You realize then that thankfulness is not learned behavior, it is the soul's original language. From this place, you stop measuring your life against imagined standards. You no longer ask whether you are ahead or behind, winning or losing. Those questions belong to the ego, which survives by comparison. Gratitude frees you from that endless accounting. It invites you to step out of the marketplace of worth and into the sanctuary of being. Here, nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be justified. Your existence is enough. When challenges appear, as they inevitably will, you meet them differently. You no longer see them as punishments or signs that something has gone wrong. You begin to sense that difficulty often arrives not to break you, but to empty you of illusions about control, permanence, and separation. Gratitude allows you to stay open during these moments, to remain teachable rather than defensive. And in that openness, life reveals wisdom that resistance could never access. You may notice that even sorrow carries a strange tenderness when met with gratitude. There is a softness that emerges when you stop fighting grief and allow it to move through you. Gratitude does not erase sadness, it dignifies it. It says this too belongs. It honors the depth of your capacity to feel, to care, to love. And in honoring that depth, healing unfolds naturally, without force or denial. As you continue to live this way, you begin to recognize that every encounter is an opportunity to practice awareness. Every conversation becomes a mirror. Every interruption becomes a reminder to return to presence. Gratitude keeps you awake. It prevents you from drifting into unconscious habits and old identities. It gently calls you back to yourself, again and again, whenever you forget. Over time, this way of being changes how you experience time itself. You stop rushing through moments in pursuit of future satisfaction. You stop postponing peace. You understand that fulfillment is not a destination, but a quality of attention. When you give your full presence to what is happening now, gratitude naturally follows, because presence reveals the inherent richness of life. You may find yourself less reactive, less entangled in drama, less inclined to defend a rigid sense of self. The ego loosens because it is no longer needed for survival. Gratitude assures you that you are supported by something larger than personal effort alone. You begin to trust the flow of life, not blindly, but with a quiet confidence born of experience. You have seen that when you let go, you are not abandoned, you are carried. In this trust, compassion deepens. You recognize that everyone you encounter is doing the best they can with the level of awareness they have. This understanding does not excuse harmful behavior, but it frees you from the burden of hatred and blame. Gratitude allows you to respond rather than react, to choose love without self-betrayal, to set boundaries without closing your heart. Eventually, gratitude becomes less about words and more about presence. You no longer need to say thank you constantly because your way of living expresses it. Your patience expresses it. Your listening expresses it. Your willingness to remain open expresses it. Life feels less like a problem to be solved and more like a mystery to be lived. And in quiet moments, perhaps when you least expect it, you may feel a deep sense of belonging, not to a group, not to a role, not to an identity, but to existence itself. You feel at home in your own awareness. You realize that you have never been separate from the source of life you thank each morning. You are not a visitor here. You are an expression of the very intelligence you call God. From this realization, gratitude flows effortlessly. It is no longer something you practice. It is something you are. And in being it, you fulfill the deepest purpose of life, to awaken, to love, and to remember the sacredness of every moment you are given. And as this belonging becomes familiar, you may notice a gentle dissolving of urgency within you. The frantic need to hurry, to arrive somewhere else, to become someone more acceptable or more complete, slowly fades. Gratitude teaches patience without effort. It whispers that life is not late, that you are not behind, that nothing essential has been missed. There is a profound relief in realizing that the universe is not rushing you, and neither is your soul. In this softened pace, you begin to hear your inner guidance more clearly. The quiet intuition that was once drowned out by fear and mental noise now has space to speak. It does not shout or demand. It nudges. It invites. Gratitude tunes you to this subtle frequency because it quiets the ego's constant insistence on certainty. When you are grateful, you no longer need to know everything in advance. You trust the next step to reveal itself when you are ready to take it. You may also begin to see how often you once withheld gratitude, waiting for life to meet certain conditions before you allowed yourself to feel at peace. You waited for answers, for recognition, for resolution. But gratitude shows you that peace was never meant to be conditional. It was meant to be chosen. In choosing gratitude now, you reclaim authority over your inner world. You stop outsourcing your well-being to circumstances beyond your control. This choice does not make you passive. It makes you aligned. When your actions arise from gratitude rather than fear, they carry a different quality. There is less force and more clarity, less striving and more flow. You find yourself responding to life with a quiet intelligence that feels both personal and universal, as though you are cooperating with something wiser than individual will. In moments when the mind returns to old habits of worry or self-judgment, gratitude becomes your anchor. You do not scold yourself for drifting. You simply return again and again. Each return is an act of kindness toward yourself. Each return reinforces the truth that awareness is always available, that you are never truly lost, only temporarily distracted. You may notice that gratitude also reshapes how you experience solitude. What once felt like loneliness may begin to feel like spaciousness. You discover that being alone does not mean being cut off from life. In fact, it can be the place where you feel most connected to your breath, your thoughts, your inner stillness. Gratitude turns solitude into sanctuary. And when you are with others, you bring this same presence with you. You listen without rehearsing responses. You speak without needing to impress. You allow silence without discomfort. Gratitude creates a sense of inner sufficiency that frees relationships from unconscious demands. Love flows more easily when it is not asked to fill an inner void. Over time, gratitude teaches you to trust impermanence. You see that everything changes, and instead of clinging, you learn to appreciate. You savor moments precisely because you know they will pass. This awareness does not create sadness, it deepens appreciation. It sharpens your attention to what is here now while it is here. There is a quiet courage that grows from this way of living. You become willing to meet life as it is, without armor, without cynicism, without closing your heart. Gratitude makes you brave because it reminds you that even when things fall apart, something essential remains untouched. Your awareness, your capacity to love, your connection to the source of life itself. And so you continue moment by moment, not trying to perfect your life, but learning to participate in it fully. You thank God not only in moments of clarity, but also in moments of doubt, not only in moments of joy, but also in moments of uncertainty, because you understand now that gratitude is not a reaction to life, it is a way of meeting it. In this meeting, something extraordinary becomes ordinary. You realize that the sacred is not hidden in special events or distant ideals. It is present in your breath, your awareness, your willingness to say yes to this moment. And as you live from this understanding, gratitude ceases to be something you remember to do. It becomes the quiet atmosphere of your life, steady, grounding, and endlessly alive. And within this atmosphere, you may begin to sense a deeper reverence for your own life, not as a story to be evaluated, but as a living expression unfolding in real time. You stop standing outside yourself, judging the arc of your existence, and step back inside the experience of being alive. Gratitude draws you inward, away from abstraction and into intimacy with the present moment. It invites you to inhabit your life rather than observe it from a distance. In this inhabiting, you recognize that awareness itself is the great gift. Long before outcomes, achievements, or explanations, there is the simple fact that you are aware. You can feel, perceive, reflect, and choose. Gratitude arises naturally when you realize that consciousness is not something you earned, yet it has been entrusted to you. This awareness is the doorway through which life experiences itself, and you are that doorway. As this understanding deepens, you may notice a quiet humility replacing the need for certainty. You no longer feel compelled to have final answers about everything. You become comfortable with mystery. Gratitude allows you to rest in not knowing, to trust that life is larger than your interpretations of it. This humility is not weakness, it is wisdom. It frees you from the exhausting need to control the uncontrollable. You begin to see how often the mind tried to protect you by tightening, by predicting, by bracing against disappointment. Gratitude gently tells the mind that it can relax now, that vigilance is no longer required. That life does not need to be managed moment by moment for you to be safe. In this relaxation, the nervous system settles, and with it, a deeper sense of well-being emerges, not as excitement, but as steadiness. From this steadiness, creativity flows. Ideas arise without strain. Solutions appear without force. Gratitude clears the inner space where inspiration lives. When you are not consumed by lack or fear, the natural intelligence within you has room to move. You begin to act not from pressure, but from resonance, doing what feels aligned rather than what feels expected. You may also find that gratitude softens your relationship with your own imperfections. You stop seeing them as flaws to be eliminated and begin seeing them as signals, invitations to compassion, patience, and growth. Gratitude does not demand that you become flawless. It asks only that you remain honest and open. In this openness, transformation occurs naturally, without harshness. As days pass, gratitude teaches you something essential about time. You realize that life is not made of years or milestones, but of moments of awareness strung together. When you are present for those moments, life feels full, regardless of its length. When you are absent, even abundance feels empty. Gratitude keeps you present by continually returning your attention to what is real. There may come moments when gratitude feels difficult, when circumstances challenge your trust and test your patience. In those moments, gratitude does not ask you to deny your feelings. It asks you to stay conscious within them, to notice the breath beneath the emotion, to recognize the awareness that is larger than the experience passing through it. Even here, something can be honored, the strength to feel, the capacity to endure, the intelligence guiding you through uncertainty. Gradually, you begin to sense that gratitude is not about improving life, but about understanding it. It reveals that life is not a problem to solve, but a relationship to participate in. And like any relationship, it deepens with attention, honesty, and care. When you meet life with gratitude, life meets you with meaning. And so you continue, not striving to maintain a perfect state, but allowing gratitude to be your returning point. Again and again, you come back to the breath, to awareness, to the quiet recognition that you are alive in this moment. Nothing more is required. Nothing essential is missing. In this simplicity, you find freedom. Not freedom from challenge, but freedom from the illusion that challenge defines you. Gratitude anchors you in what is timeless within you, the awareness that observes, the presence that endures, the quiet knowing that you are held by something infinitely patient and profoundly kind. And from this knowing, life unfolds not as something to endure, but as something to receive, moment by moment, breath by breath, with a heart that understands, at last, why every moment is worthy of thanks.